Welcome to freedivorce.com.
This is Christina.
And this is Ed. Today we're going to talk about issues related to division of the family home. And for many people, their most valuable asset is going to be the family home. Christina, can you tell us the most common way of dealing with the family home in a divorce situation?
So, probably not surprising, the most common way divorcing couples deal with the family home is to sell it and divide the net sale proceeds.
If you and your spouse are going to agree to sell the family home, what are some of the items you're going to need to agree upon?
You will need to agree on numerous issues, including the following. Number 1, which realtor will you use to sell the home? 2, at what price are you going to list it for sale? 3, when will the home be listed for sale? 4, what improvements will you make to the home before it's listed for sale? And 5, who will live in the house until it is sold? And finally, who will pay for the expenses associated with the house until it is sold?
Well, who lives in the house until it is sold?
If you and your spouse are able to do so, it will certainly save money if both of you and your spouse can continue to live in the home until the home is sold. If you can do this, then the two of you can continue to pool your earnings and you'll continue to pay your bills as you did during the marriage. After the home is sold, you can then establish separate residences. Support payments, if any, can start at that time.
What if one spouse wants to keep the family home? What do you need to discuss and agree upon?
If one spouse wants to keep the family home, that spouse will need to buy out the other spouse's ownership interest in the home. The first step is to agree on a buyout amount. You will start by trying to agree on the fair market value of the home.
How do couples typically reach an agreement on the fair market value of the home?
You can determine the fair market value in any number of ways. One way is to hire an appraiser, but that will cost you around $600. Another way is to contact 2 or 3 realtors in your area and ask them to provide a free market analysis. Most realtors will gladly provide a free market analysis because they hope they will get the listing if the property ends up being sold. You should both be present when the appraiser or the realtors inspect the property. If you get multiple appraisals, you can average them to come up with a fair market value. After you have agreed on the value of the home, subtract the mortgage balance to arrive at the equity. Another way you can do it is you can agree on a fair market value. If your neighbor's house sold the previous month and it's similar to yours, that may give you an accurate idea of what your house is worth without any additional appraisals or doing market analysis.
All right, after you reach an agreement on the fair market value of the home, how do you decide the amount of the buyout price?
If the home is entirely community property and neither party has any reimbursement rights, then the typical buyout price will be equal to 1/2 of the equity. So, if the house is worth, let's say, $500,000 and you owe $300,000 on it, there's basically $200,000 in equity. The buyout price will be half of $200,000 or $100,000 to be paid to the other spouse.
Well, what about discounting the buyout price for real estate commissions? I mean, if the home were sold for $500,000, about $25,000 would go for real estate commissions. Shouldn't that buyout price be discounted because if the house were sold, the parties would net, they're not going to net $200,000. They would net about $175,000 because of the real estate commission. Shouldn't the buyout price be half of $175,000, not half of $200,000?
Generally, there is no discount for a hypothetical real estate commission. In other words, the spouse wanting to buy out the other party's interest may want to discount the value of the home by 5% because of a real estate commission would be paid sometime in the future if the house were actually sold. However, the house is not being sold. The commission is not being paid. The idea of discounting the house buyout amount by a hypothetical sale commission amount is simply too speculative. So the buyout price is not normally discounted due to a non-existent commission. However, this issue, like all issues, is negotiable as part of the settlement package.
All right, what if one party used their separate property for the down payment, or they used their separate property to improve the house? What do you do in that kind of case?
If you used your separate property funds to purchase or improve the family home, then you are entitled to be reimbursed for your separate property contribution. I'll give you an example. Assume when you and your spouse purchased the home, you paid $50,000 for the down payment, and that $50,000 was your separate money because you earned it and saved it before you got married. When the house is sold, you should be reimbursed with the first $50,000 of the total net sale proceeds, and the balance should be split equally between the community. Another example. Assume you and your spouse purchased the family home using community funds, but during the marriage, your spouse inherited $50,000, and all of that money was used to put in a new swimming pool. The inherited money was your spouse's separate property. Your spouse would have a right to be reimbursed from the sale proceeds for the $50,000 because it was used to improve the home.
Well, if you use $50,000 of your separate property funds for the down payment on the house, and let's say you did that years ago, and let's say the house is appreciated during the marriage, do you get interest on that $50,000 or do you get any part of the appreciation?
You are not entitled to collect interest on your $50,000, nor are you entitled to part of the appreciation. If you took title to the house in both names, the house is community property, and your reimbursement claim is limited to getting a credit for the separate property funds you put into the property.
If my spouse is going to buy out my interest in the family home, what happens to the existing mortgage? That mortgage obligation is going to be held in both of our names, and I'm worried what will happen if she buys out my interest.
Yeah, if there is going to be a buyout, the spouse keeping the family home should refinance all loans that are connected to the home. If you have a mortgage, the mortgage should be refinanced with a new loan issued in the name of the party that is going to keep the home. If you have a home equity line of credit, that also should be refinanced with a new loan in the name of the party that's going to keep the home. The old loans, which are held in both parties' names, should be paid off and replaced with loans that are held in the name of the spouse that's keeping the property.
Well, what would happen if I agree to sell my 1/2 interest in the family home to my spouse, but she does not refinance the mortgage, but instead just keeps the original mortgage in place?
Yeah, that could be a problem. If you sell your 1/2 ownership interest in the family home to your spouse and the mortgage is not refinanced, then your name is still on the old mortgage. It does not matter if you sign a deed removing your name from the title to the home if your name will still be on the loan. This can create at least 2 problems for you. First, if your ex-spouse fails to pay the monthly mortgage payments in a timely manner, your credit could be damaged. Second, if your name is on the old mortgage, you will have to disclose that loan obligation when you go to buy a new home for yourself and you apply for a mortgage. Having your name on an old mortgage will make it more difficult for you to obtain a new mortgage when you go to buy a new home for yourself.
What if my spouse can't qualify for a new mortgage in her sole name? Then what?
If your spouse can't qualify to refinance the old mortgage, that may make it impossible for your spouse to buy out your interest unless you're willing to run the risk that your credit may be impaired and or that it will be more difficult for you to obtain a mortgage in the future because your name is still on an old mortgage.
All right, let's assume my spouse can qualify to refinance the house and get a new loan in just her name. Where does the money come from to pay me for my 1/2 ownership interest in the house?
Well, if you have enough equity in the home, when the buying spouse goes to refinance, he or she may be able to obtain a loan that is large enough to pay off the old loan and also allow for cash to be taken out. That cash can be used to pay the buyout price. Another option is to use other assets to accomplish the buyout. For example, one spouse keeps the family home and the other spouse keeps the bulk of the retirement assets or other assets that may exist.
Well, is it a good idea for one spouse to take retirement assets as an offset to the other spouse keeping the family home?
If you're going to use retirement assets to accomplish the buyout, remember, the equity in the family home oftentimes consists of after-tax dollars. If the home were sold, oftentimes no income taxes will be due on the proceeds because a $500,000 capital gain exemption will frequently apply for married couples. Retirement account funds are almost always pre-tax dollars. In other words, $100,000 of pre-tax dollars contained in a traditional IRA account or a 401k account is worth a lot less than $100,000 of equity in the family home.
Are there any advantages to one spouse keeping the family home?
Oh yes, there can be substantial advantages to having one spouse keep the family home. First, the home may have a low property tax basis, particularly if the home was purchased many years ago. If you sell the family home, that low property tax basis will be lost, although the property tax basis can sometimes be transferred by one spouse to a new home if you're over 55 and meet various additional qualifications. Second, if you sell the home, you will lose some significant amount of equity to real estate commissions. If you're selling a $1 million house with a 5% real estate commission, $50,000 of equity will disappear because it will be paid to the realtors, and half of that $50,000 is your share of the equity. If your spouse is willing to buy out your interest in the home without discounting the equity due to a hypothetical real estate commission, then that puts more money in your pocket as opposed to selling the home to a third party. And third, if you have children, you should think about how selling the home will impact the children. You may not want to displace the children. If the family home is sold, you and your spouse may not be able to afford to purchase a new home in the same school district. If you sell the family home, your spouse may relocate far away with the children. There are a lot of factors that need to be taken into consideration when deciding whether to sell the family home or for one spouse to buy out the other spouse's interest in the home.
If I agree to sell my 1/2 interest in the family home, don't I need to sign some sort of deed or other paperwork?
Yes, if one spouse is going to buy out the other spouse's ownership interest in the family home, then an interspousal transfer deed will need to be signed and recorded with the county recorder's office.
Can I find an interspousal transfer deed in the court forms database on the website that I can fill out?
No, an interspousal transfer deed is not a judicial counsel form. However, you can find fillable PDF examples of interspousal transfer deeds on the internet. A quitclaim deed or a grant deed will also work, but the interspousal transfer deed is better because it contains language letting the county recorder know that the transfer is being made pursuant to a divorce settlement and is not subject to a documentary transfer tax, and that the property should not be reappraised for property tax purposes.
Will my signature on the deed, the interspousal transfer deed or the grant deed or the quitclaim deed, will that need to be notarized?
Yes, whichever type of deed you use, the signatures on the deed will need to be notarized. Just Google notaries near me. A notary will charge $15 per signature.
After the deed is signed, does it need to be recorded with the county recorder's office?
Yes, you will need to record the deed. The spouse keeping the house normally assumes the task of getting the deed recorded. Just take the deed to the recorder's office in the county where the home is located. The county recorder will charge a small fee to record the deed, usually around $30. When you record the deed with the county recorder, the spouse keeping the home will also need to fill out a preliminary change of ownership form. Again, this is not a judicial counsel form, but is a form you can obtain online from your local county recorder's office.
This has been a presentation by freedivorce.com.